Well everyone, it's time for us to go ahead and take a look at the iPhone 13 and see how this phone holds up in 2023. Now what's very funny about this phone is that it is easily still one of the better iPhones you can buy from a dollar, per value standpoint, and I still think it's a very good device. Is it perfect? No, but it is honestly very close to being perfect, and to be honest, if this thing just had a 120Hz panel, I think it would probably be still a phone you'd use every single day. But let's go and see some of the success, some of the failures with this specific phone in this specific year. Now, if you want to pick up this phone, links will be down in the description. You can get this phone from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the specific phone, on the front, we do have that 6.1-inch Super Retina OLED display. Actually, it's a Super Retina XDR OLED display. Don't forget about the XDR. Now, this panel, it's 60 Hz, so nothing super crazy going on with it. But like I mentioned before, iOS and just, iPhone's panels in general are very smooth, and you could still have a 60 Hz panel on this phone but still have it feel like almost like 120 Hz. It's crazy, maybe not 120 Hz, that's maybe a stretch, maybe like 90 Hz at best, but it's still a very smooth panel. However, you still have the notch, which is kind of a downside, and that's kind of the more annoying things when you're getting a phone like this. I would say a majority of phones nowadays are moving away from that. Even Apple's iPhones are moving away from that now with the iPhone 14 Pro panel. But I guess it's just one of those, kind of cons if you're getting a phone like this. It's just one of those things you're going to have to keep in mind. Now on the bottom you have the lightning port, which is still great. I still love having lightning, but that could very well change to USB-C potentially this year. And if that were to happen, I could see a lot of people switching away from some of these older iPhones to a newer USB-C iPhone, especially if Apple brings some really cool features with that. Now there's no headphone jack, no micro SD card slot, never been like that on any iPhone, at least the SD card slot. We used to have no headphone jacks for sure. Now on the back, we do have our glass backs, which I still think look very, very good. I think having a glass back is great. The frosted glass backs, though, are probably my favorite backs on any phone, but this one doesn't have it, but it's kind of okay at the end of the day. It's really not that crazy big of a deal. Now we do have that dual camera setup up top as well, and that kind of covers it up. Now we still have standard things like wireless charging. We have the MagSafe charging little plug at the back. We have, IP certification as well. So it's still a pretty good phone when it comes down to it. Like, it's not like a super outdated feeling phone by any means. And I would still say in this day and age, like, it's still fairly solid. So on the outside, just from that, truly does get a thumbs up for me. And when you think about it with the iPhone 14, not only are, internally the iPhone 14 and 13 super similar, but the iPhone 13 on the exterior are also very similar as well. So you kind of have to keep in mind that at the end of the day. So in terms of that, definitely I would say still gets a thumbs up for me for sure. Now in terms of the camera setup, like I mentioned, this phone has a dual camera setup on the back. So it has a wide angle lens, and it also has a ultra wide camera as well, which I think is great. On the front, you have a 12 megapixel wide angle camera as well. And one thing that we can definitely say with any iPhone that has ever came out is basically iPhones have very good sensors. For that specific year, they are very predictable. They are just very good cameras for sure. And anytime I've had to use a camera from an iPhone, it has been solid and dependable. And this is no different. I would say when it came out in 2021, this camera was very good for what it was. Maybe it wasn't perfect. And, even compared to the phones like the Galaxy S22, S21 at that time, the Pixel 6 Pro at that time had a pretty good camera too. This thing was pretty solid, and I think that was a good thing. Now, has it aged great? Yeah, I would say it's still a good camera in terms of the aging of it, mostly because when you compare it against the iPhone 14, there really wasn't too much different with that camera. I mean, you had stabilization mode and some improvements with cinematic mode, but otherwise it was kind of the same camera. So there really wasn't even that much of a difference there, which is just one of those things that kind of annoyed me, but it's just one of those things to keep in mind. So from that specific standpoint, there's not really too many differences between this phone and the next phone, but also some things that you may be lacking with a specific phone, in my opinion, probably is that telephoto lens. So with this phone, you are missing telephoto, so you can't zoom in a crazy amount. You can still do, I think, 5 or 7x zoom, but you can't do that 10, 15, 50x zoom that you can do on the S22 Ultra. So there's still a lot of room for improvement with this type of camera, but I will still say, for what it is and for what it was at that time and how it's been holding up so far, I think it's a pretty good camera at the end of the day. So in terms of that, I still say it gets a thumbs up for me for sure. Now in the software and the longevity portion of this specific phone, this is the other area of this phone that could potentially be a little bit interesting. So for one, I think this phone is going to be lasting for a very long amount of time. This phone is not going anywhere anytime soon. And when you're getting a phone like an iPhone 13, this phone's going to be here for a long period of time. And that's the greatest thing about having an iPhone. You can just have this phone pretty much forever. And that is one of my favorite things about this phone. So in this day and age, you're getting being a phone that's going to be supported for a long period of time, and even though it's already like almost 2 years old this year, it's still going to be here for a long period of time. But the more interesting thing with this phone is actually with, basically the successor. With the iPhone 14, how does that iPhone affect this specific iPhone? And the way it affects it is because this iPhone and its successor have the same chipset. So what is that going to do for the future of this iPhone? I'm not 100% too sure. We're going to have to kind of see what happens there, but that is definitely going to be one of the more interesting things going for this specific phone. Is this specific iPhone going to last as long as the iPhone 14 or vice versa? I guess we're going to see how, what kind of happens there. But in terms of the software and the longevity, this phone's still going to be supported for many, many more years. I wouldn't even worry about I wouldn't be worried about that in this specific device. However, the performance of this phone is still very, very good as well. You have that Apple A15 Bionic chip inside of it with 4 gigabytes of RAM. Now, like I've said before, in my opinion, this phone is still very smooth and still very, very fast. If you think about it, even though this phone is almost 2 years old now, this phone's chipset is still kind of current. You have to keep in mind that with Apple, with what they've been doing recently with these chipsets, they've been kind of delaying the chipset now. So the Apple A15 Bionic chip is still inside of the iPhone 14. Maybe it's a little bit of a faster version, but it's pretty much the same exact chipset, which is insane. So that's why I think this phone could end up lasting a much longer period of time than the majority of people even probably think about. So that is a huge thing to keep in mind with this device. Now, in basically everything I've ever done with this phone in terms of a performance standpoint, it has been perfect. It's been really good. I use this phone all of the time for many videos on my main channel, but also many videos on my second channel as well. Third channel even, it does a great job at really doing everything I throw at it. So from that perspective, I really do like this phone. I think for light and, minor apps, it does perfectly fine, but especially when you go up to those bigger intensive applications, things like Genshin Impact or playing maybe some emulators, very, very small emulators on this phone because there's not a lot available, at least without having to use some other services. So I think this phone in and of itself gets a thumbs up for me from the performance perspective. From everything I've pretty much seen people complaining about this iPhone, even for the last almost a year and a half, I haven't really seen too many people complain about the performance of this phone. Again, without it having a 120Hz panel, it can feel a little bit slower than usual. But I don't think it's a big deal. I still think this phone performs very, very well just from that perspective alone. So in terms of that, it definitely gets a thumbs up for me. And even the battery life standpoint, this thing, when it came out, 3,240 mAh battery, I'm still at about 100% battery health. Now, it's probably not exactly 100%, that's what my iPhone says, but that's still pretty good that I didn't have crazy amounts of battery degradation going on with this phone like many people had it with their iPhone 12s and iPhone 12 Pro like I personally had. So kind of one thing to keep in mind as well. And to kind of sum up this whole entire video, what I'll definitely tell you is I think this specific iPhone is still very much worth it in 2023. It is a very solid iPhone with a lot of capability, and I don't see why anybody would want to even think about upgrading from this phone unless the next iPhone somehow brings some crazy cool feature that's unheard of. Even USB-C wouldn't be that big of a reason for me to upgrade, but I think with something like, the iPhone 13, still a very solid iPhone, still has a long future ahead of it, and I would highly, highly, highly recommend picking up this iPhone for sure. So in terms of that kind of covers it up. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.